When I returned in the evening, I was a little puzzled. It looks like I forgot to turn off the light in the apartment again before leaving. But somehow I often began to forget. Strange and slightly incomprehensible things began to happen to me quite recently, a couple of months ago. Several times I lost things, not much less I heard strange noises from neighbors at night, and constantly when I come home after work, I find that the light in my room is on. Sitting down in the kitchen for dinner, which consisted of fast food, I remembered my morning. When I woke up, I turned off the light and went to the kitchen to have breakfast, and I did not return to the room anymore. The viands on the table were already over, and I went to deal with the wiring and the chandelier, because that was most likely the problem. However, after examining everything, I did not find anything that could turn on the light, but just in case I replaced the switch with a new one and calmed down. My calmness disappeared the next evening when I returned home in the evening and saw that the light was on in the room. Yes, so that, I swore in anger, went to the switch, was about to press it, but stopped. I noticed that on the mirror, next to the switch, there is something strange, namely, a handprint. Not my hand. I came closer, even sat down, and began to look at it. A very unusual, some kind of strange hand. The fingers are thin and long. And here begins my story of mysticism, which has never been in my life before. I couldn't figure out what it was. Without turning off the light, I thoughtfully went to the kitchen, constantly wondering what it could be and how it appeared in my apartment. I couldn't answer these questions for myself, but I thought of doing something else. I quickly got up and went into the room, and began to examine all the mirrors and glasses with a flashlight. So, on another mirror and one window, I found the same hands. That's generally wonderful, I muttered in some small such fear. Now, returning home every evening, I examined every glass and mirror, looking for new prints of the unknown, and one day, such appeared. First on the window in the room, then on the mirror in the hallway. I was constantly wondering where all this could come from, because I lived alone in the apartment, or still not alone. A completely insane incident happened very soon. It was a day off. Somewhere in the evening, when I was cleaning up in the hallway, something suddenly clicked behind me. It clicked so loudly. I turned around abruptly and saw that the light in the room had turned on. That is, someone, just behind me, pressed the switch. Standing in silence and fear, I looked at my room, which seemed to be lit, but at the same time it did not inspire me with peace. I quietly went into the room, looked around, and apparently out of some kind of despair, I just asked out loud, "Well, what is it?" In the same second I heard the click of a switch, and in a moment, I was left in the dark. It was a very strange coincidence, but from that moment on, all hopes for coincidences began to crumble little by little. From now on, usually in the evenings, the light turned on and off by itself. I almost constantly began to find new prints of unrealistically large hands on mirrors and glasses, and then I began to hear knocks. It happened at night. Almost falling asleep to the monotonous sound of the winter wind outside the window, I suddenly heard that a strange thing came from the kitchen, a quick and short knock, as if on a wooden table. I was a little tense, even scared, you might say. And when a couple more minutes had passed, the same knock sounded again. As if playfully, someone began to knock not only on the table in the kitchen, but also on the doors. And it wasn't funny anymore. The knocks resounded in the silence of the night, scattered around the apartment, and then very quiet footsteps began to be heard, and as a result, I heard something turn on the light in the kitchen. Only after about an hour all this stopped. I got this apartment a long time ago. I lived in it for 15 years, and then moved to my parents for 2 years. In all this time, nothing like this has ever happened. While I was away from here, so that the apartment wouldn't just stand there, I rented it to a guy, a student at a local institute, and he also didn't tell me anything about the paranormal. Then where and what the hell are these crazy things coming from? However, there was one moment with my lodger Sasha, which may seem a little strange. He always paid me 2 months in advance, and once again we never crossed paths, but one day, without explaining the reasons, he called me and said that he was moving next month, and I could keep the money. As he said, he transferred somewhere to another city and he no longer needs my apartment. What if something happened here? I got into the phone to look for Sasha's number, and decided to call him. Long beeps and nothing else. Perhaps it was not a good time to call, but when I called him back in the morning, then in the afternoon, and again in the evening, No one answered me. Meanwhile, a new restless night has come. Night, silence, a little darkness and anxiety. Lying in bed, I kept thinking about where my former lodger Sasha had gone, where he had moved out so quickly and why he even refused money, but these questions quickly dissipated into something. The interior door, which had previously been closed by me, slowly and with a slight creak, began to open. There was something wrong. The door opened halfway, and then began to close back, as if someone had entered the room or as if someone had decided to play with me. I didn't see anyone, but I could have sworn someone was definitely standing at the door. That was the feeling of presence. In this silence of the night, without looking up, I looked in the direction of the switch and waited for it to be pressed. Pressed. The sound of the switch. The light appeared in the room, there was no one. Another sound. Like a New Year's garland, the light in my room was constantly flashing, and when darkness reigned after a couple of minutes, calmness did not come to me. I expected that everything was over now, that I would pack my things and leave far away from here, but no matter how, it was not the end. The window, with a creak and very slowly, began to open. When the window opened to the end, maybe 2 or 3 seconds later, it abruptly closed with all its might, causing the glass to fly in different directions. A strange sound that came out of nowhere, like someone's laughter, was flying around the apartment, and I very quickly grabbed the first thing that came to hand and flew out like a bullet into a dark, gloomy entrance. Everything that had happened couldn't fit into my head, it was simply impossible and unreal. I called Sasha several more times, texted him again, but no one answered me. It's a winter night, -2, the snow hasn't completely melted yet, and I'm standing outside in trousers and a shirt. Not a very pleasant situation. I didn't want to go back. It was only in the morning that I returned to my apartment. Carefully walking through the hallway, the kitchen, and stopping in the room, I began to think hard about what I should do now, and suddenly some thought pierced me like lightning: wallpaper. Damn you, I said, looking at this new wallpaper that was on the old walls of the 5-story building. The strangeness of Sasha was not only that he did not take the money, although I offered him, he also pasted new wallpaper for some reason, although the old ones were quite normal. I didn't think for long. Approaching the wall, I slowly began to tear off the wallpaper, and after about 20 minutes, I was just stunned. Under them, there was something painted. All over the wall, there were some geometric figures in a chaotic order that was impossible to understand, and at the bottom, right by the baseboard, there were 3 such notebook leaves. These leaves were ordinary, but there were absolutely unusual things on them. On a smaller scale, it was painted exactly the same thing that was on my wall. A small postscript from the bottom made it clear that I was in a not very good situation. There was written the time, the phase of the moon, even the day and month when you can summon immortal essence, so it was written there. From the kitchen, something knocked. I jerked in surprise, threw this piece of paper, quickly looked at the drawing on the wall, and tried to do something. I pulled the old wallpaper sharply, wanting to destroy part of the figure, and then it got even worse. This drawing with paint, or something similar, has become ingrained inside, under the old wallpaper, right into the walls. Another knock. Only closer. I take a hammer from a drawer nearby, a large nail, and drive it right into part of the drawing. Another knock. He doesn't care. I see that the paint is already inside the wall, it has painted everything, and I understand that even if I demolish this whole wall, it is unlikely to help, because it is already here. I grabbed my documents, threw the hammer and nails, and ran towards the exit. Before I close the door, I see a strange shadow flash by the kitchen table. Short, dark, and with very thin limbs, and without a face. I really wanted to find Sasha, my former lodger. I wanted to tell him a lot, and I found him by the way. At the local cemetery. As it turned out, 2 weeks after he left my apartment, he moved into another one, in the opposite part of the city, where he died suddenly soon after. Heart attack at 25. The doctors said so. But the motives that prompted him to make a certain call of certain forces are now impossible to find out. And now he's lying in the cemetery, and a new tenant now lives in my apartment, and somehow I don't want to go kick him out.